Angular is all about creating custom elements, intelligent elements, and using them again and again to make your job easy. You need to understand what is component. Angular component is a training for that HTML to render a specific selector like this app root or something. So let me create another component if you're wondering, if you wanted to understand. So ngGC, this is a shortcut for generating component. ngGC, my component is generated and my component is been added to the module also. It's imported here. Am I able to see my custom component? No. Why? Because that is not yet referred in the VUI. So I come here, I take this selector, app custom element, go to app, and if I come here, that is coming here. So now I can go ahead, I can go ahead and create it, create a custom element. So can I do that? Yeah. Go to your HTML, use input itself, type range, app custom elements. So now browser knows what is custom element because it is an Angular project. So you can teach your browser tricks and techniques. Okay. So if you are using Angular, it's mostly about data and application that extensively work with data. So application that like your personal portfolio site and everything, they can still be a static HTML. They don't need to be Angular app. So if there is Angular is best suited for data visualization. So if you need custom elements, if you need single page application, if you need data visualization, because if you have some data and you need to put that visually represented, you can teach Angular the way you want to interpret your. So let me create in the app component. Let me first create a to do application has always been our best companion, because let us use the same. Because you guys bored of using developing to do apps? Let me create library app then. Okay. So library data. So this is the way that you create your variables in Angular. So you should not say var or const and that directly on the component. Remember rule number 1, directly on the component, never use var or const let. You can use public or private. If you say private, this variable will not be accessible on the view. Remember, if you said private, this variable is not accessible on the view. If you did not put anything, this variable is directly accessible. This is a by default a public variable. This is a public property, and this property from this app component will be accessible on HTML. If you say the moment you said private keyword, now this is not accessible on the HTML. So let me put it. Let me tell you how. So library app, my first book name. So this is how you access your data. If you have a variable, if you put two curly braces and keep that value there, and your data is accessible. What is this? This is object, because if anything that any JavaScript object you print, the HTML will only print object, right? You know that. So how can I get this data? How can I work with this data? Okay, that's when the concept called directives come into place. Okay, so what is directive? Let me give you an example. So Angular has some directives, structural directives by default for you to use to work with data. So dev h1, I want to show a message if there are no books in the library. Okay, no books available is the message I want to display. When do I want to display this message? If there are no books in this data. So when the, how can we decide? If the length of this array is 0, then there are no books. So Angular has a structural directive to do that. So star ng if, this is the directive, and the directive value can be like this: library data dot length, because I said this is already be accessible in browser. Now equal to 0. Now this is book is, no book is available. Because the length is not 0, it is not saying. So if, let me remove every data, all the data, and keep it empty. So now you see ng book not available. Well, how this is happening is the structural directives will take care about the visibility of that particular element in the case of, given in the case of a condition. So this is library data. If I use ngif star ngif if I capital, and the expression is this, if this expression is true, if this expression returns true, then this particular block should be visible. The element that is the directive is present on should be visible. Okay, else, okay, you can say else, in case if this is not true, okay, I want you to render something else. What it is? Books view. Okay, I want to present the books views. So where this books view is, it should be here. So you can create a view like this, ng template. So this is another directive or component that is directly available from Angular. So Angular common module will always give you. So you should name it with this. So what is it called? Books view. Now if you keep, if your HTML back, it still, if there is nothing, so I can put the HTML here saying here the books will load. Okay, it's still, my books are length is 0. Let me put back my old data. Now here the books will load, because now this condition is false. Now the else is triggered. Else is what? This. So if this expression is true, then render this, not this. Hope you're able to follow. I created an ng template. So this ng template is nothing but, create this template and make it dynamic, the visibility tied to this. Okay, if this length is 0, then say no books available. If the length is not 0, books are available, now you can display. So my next challenge becomes is, I have data, but I am only able to say object. I am unable to iterate them through and understand the data. There is another directive to do the job for you called ng for. So ng for is a iterative directive. So this is a visibility switch directive, visibility directive. So, and now you can do that. So if, let me say dev class book, I'm writing one book element, start star ng for, okay, let book of, so iterate through, just run a for loop to this. So this would be confusing for you. If there are no books, display this message. If the length is not 0, it is greater than 0, then load this view. And if you load this, there could be multiple sets of data. Ng for loop, iterate this element for the just run it this element in for loop, like we used it in EJS also. We use this iterative statement, and you just ng for for each, and then we iterate it. But Angular, it is far more simple. This is it. And now you can access this book. Ng for you create a book, a constant or a variable called book, and for each iteration, for each element, you get the data one element and give it in the book. Now you can say lm also. So this is equivalent to library data dot for each of element, and you are sending an element to in this view inside. So I can simply call book. I can span, put a book name. I can say book dot, not library data, but book dot book name. If I save this, okay. If I save this, compile successfully, if I go back to my site, I am seeing. So my bad, because I have added some style here. So I'll remove the style. Now I could see both the books printed. First takeaway, you can access any data that is readily available in app component on HTML. First takeaway. Second takeaway, Angular offers you some structural directives to help you with traversing with your information. Just the same way we did it in the EJS. EJS, we checked for visibility. If there is a message, we displayed messages. If there is some data, we iterated through the data and we created some books information. So same thing. It is far more simpler. It may visible tricky, but it is far simpler than EJS. It is far more simpler than EJS. Now I'm actually creating everything in the app component itself. So I will divide these things again. Later I'll come to that part. But for now, you understand everything in one place. Then I will move into different components. Any questions so far? Anything that you did not understood? Okay. I'm again repeating. ngIf is one structural directive. Okay. That will check for the data validity and control the visibility of the particular element. If you want something to be visible, if a certain condition is met, it is possible. If else, it is this. And you can also do that. You can also, create then also so then you can say then and put another template. ng template and say no books view, and you can say no books view. So it's fine. You can move that here. So it's like this. You can keep everything inside this as well. So ngIf library data, then no books view or books view. You can do it like this. Sorry, it should not be wrapped, but it should be like this. It can still be a span and maybe a div. So if this condition is met, this template will be loaded onto this div. If this condition is met, this template will be loaded onto this div. So what template should go into this is actually this structural directive, and the condition will decide. If this condition is met, then no books view will go inside. If this else, this books view will go inside and display the data. So we're still getting it. So you can still go ahead and so let me you can create this view separately, this component separately. One, you can create a one book component and bring that component here. Let me do that. Okay, if this is clear, I can move on to next topic, because if I'm moving on um, without this understanding, and that would okay, I think I'm actually being overcautious. Okay, book. So ng generate component book. I'm generating a component called book. Okay, app book. So I got book component and I can use this book component here. So let me comment this app hyphen book. We have two books works. If I have three books, you know, okay, three books, three book works. Okay, now book component is readily accessible. Book component is readily accessible. Now this is being, if there are three elements, this is coming. So can I send this book data to this to just display the book? Yes, you can do it. So you can put it like this. Say book data, one book data equal to this. Now you are sending that book, but you need to accept this book data in the book component. Okay, because you need to say at input component. So this is not imported. You need to import it from Angular core. So this is a directive. Whenever you are using some directive that is not out of your ES6 or TypeScript, you need to import it from a specific code, because we know each module should be in node modules. So what is that I called here? I called book data. So I'm going to receive an information called book data. Okay, and it can be any. Okay, so now I have to, now this is accessible on this view. Okay, so I can say book data dot book name. So basically I can move this content from there to here. Instead of book, I can say book data. Okay, again, no issues so far. I did ng for and looped through the elements, and I took a book and I'm sending that book information to this. So this is how you pass your data to different components. So I'm sending the book information to this component as book data variable. So I'm accepting that book data variable as an input here. So this directive or sorry, this decorative input decorative is accepting book data. And since it is accepting from outside, that is directly accessible here in the view, because I already created on component. Anything on the component, anything publicly available on the component, readily accessible on HTML, and I'm actually displaying it. See, same thing. Okay, same view here, but I put it in a different. In my application, if I ever need a book, I will use this component. That's it. If I ever need to display a book, I will use this component. So simply, if you look at this page, it is very simple and easy. There are so many pages. So now my one book if I have to display one book, my style is organized. So I design my this component. I style this component. Maybe let me put class for name. I'll say dot name. Okay, background color blue. See, I just had it in one place and all the components have been updated because it is only rendering from one structure element. So you only have to do it once, and wherever you use that same component will be changed across the app.
Is the book data equals book? Is book data in square
Yes.
brackets because it's an array, or is that how you are
It's
just
not an
naming
array.
the
So here the square bracket means that bind this property,
bind? Okay.
this is binding now. This in the attribute scenario, the square bracket means binding this property to this property. Okay, so let me give you a simple example. Okay, so uh, let me add a form to let me add it also because uh, this is kind of distracting. So let me add a better color. Okay, fine. Okay, we are okay, fine. Okay, good. So now in the app component, let me generate. So how can I mean, now I send data to inside to a child component. How can I get data from inside to out? Okay, now I'm sending this information, book information as book data. So book data is a property of app book. Is it? Yes. This is this property. It is a property of book component. So in the app component, I'm binding that book property. I'm binding that property to book. So whenever the book changes, the book data changes. So let's verify that, because let me add one more component. Come here to another console. Let's say add book. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm accidentally hitting my mic and it might have been not comfortable to your eyes. So let's keep book aside for now. Now I have a component called add book. Okay. Let me add that component here. So add book. As soon as I added there, so it says, no, it says not a component. Oh, sorry. App.addBook. You need to refer this selector properly because the selector should match, because that's where this is the selector the Angular is teaching that behavior, right? So yeah, add book works. So now I have so much schema there. So 4 elements I have to push. Add book, I will create 4 different input type text is a placeholder, book name. So I'm just trying to add book. It is far more easy. It's not going to take a lot of time, like okay, author, book author, pages, and status. Okay, then finally button. Now, as soon as you are trying to interact with your with a form in Angular, you need to import a module called forms module. Always remember, if one of your component is trying to access forms, trying to work with form elements, please make sure you always import forms module. Okay. So forms module will be imported from Angular forms. So always, so every other behavior, until now we used some features from browser module. So there is no need of importing another module. Now we are trying to work with, our components are trying to work with forms. Now you have to import forms module. I'll tell you why. So now let me go ahead and create an object, new book, new book is equals to an object, empty object. Okay. Now let me go here, ng model, Angular model, just create an Angular model. Now I'm actually creating banana in square. We call this, I don't know, but I call this banana in square. So when you say put a banana in square and ng model, you are binding a model. This input is actually now accessing book name. Book name doesn't exist on type. Actually, I need to put it like this: book name empty, author empty, pages empty. I'm creating an empty object, pages 0, status always in. So whenever a new book is being added, that means it's always by default in. So now I created a variable. So if I have to create a new book, this is the data that I need. So now I'm binding this data to an input element. Until now we have seen how can we integrate that in the view. Like this is how we just printed it out, book.name, author, everything is came. So now we are trying to bind the same element to a form element. That means data comes to the view and it goes from the view as well. So now we have author. This is how you bind a form element to a particular object, pages. Now this is finally status. So 4 different components and 4 different. So now we have all the things. Now save book. Now this is happening in an altogether different component, guys. Add book component. Okay, we have printed this add book component right above the thing because we are adding so many custom behaviors to this. So okay, now if I print new book here, I'm getting object, but you can put a pipe called JSON. Okay, what is this JSON means? This is a pipe to read. Pipe is filter. This is not a filter. Actually, this is pipe. This helps to stringify the data. See, if at all, this is not a stringified object. This is a JavaScript object. That's the reason it is, object. So now with this pipe, we are saying to this expression, just read it as JSON. Okay. You can say read it as currency. Okay. But this is not a currency. If we have a number here, it will read it as currency. The moment I put currency, it is treating it as dollars. You see? Or you can say it as date. So I can change the view, the interpretation of the value just by changing this pipe value. This is called pipe. You express the value and tell the interpolator the type of that particular value. When I said the type is currency, it is adding all the commas, adding the, so this is trying to make more sense of the data, a better sense of the data. So once you said it currency, it understood its currency, it understood that it needs to be have some decimals and needs to have commas. And if it is date, if you say date, it takes care about, uh, having this. And you can even configure that like how you need it. So dd, YY, so whatever the format you want, you can still get it. Okay, you can still get it, dd, YY format. So you can do that. So that's all a differentiation. I'll cover these things later. It's a wonderful tool. The pipes are wonderful things to know, but for now you understood JavaScript, I mean JSON. So if you say JSON and new book, you're asking that to print it here. So now let me change something here. You see, why did I added this? Just to give you an example that whenever I'm changing this, the value is directly updating. You see, you're not doing get element by ID dot value and add it to the form. As soon as you bound this object, this form to this entire object, and you're trying to out. So now this object is ready. Okay, so let me put a click element. How do you assign click elements in Angular? It's not the usual on click on hover method with Angular. So there is a message. Let me read. Okay, it's clear. It's okay. So in Angular, you need to understand events like this. Click. You just say click in Angular. You just say change in Angular. You will not say on change or on click or anything, on mouse over. You just say click and give a function. Handle save. Okay, you will say it like this. Now this handle save is not defined. So where should this should be? Since this template is tightly bound to this component, now that function should be here. In Angular, you should not say function keyword directly this, because this is TypeScript syntax, right? In TypeScript, you can directly create a function like this. You can either create with arrow syntax, but this is much simpler. Now, if I am trying to console.log, okay, if I log it with book, so now whenever in Angular you're trying to access a variable that is defined on it, in the component you should always say this dot. Remember, this is a hard rule. Whenever you're trying to access a variable that is defined in Angular, you should always say this dot book name. If it is book, this is you are trying to access it, this dot book name. So if you don't say this dot, it is undefined. It doesn't know to look for a, it will look for a variable called like this. Now this is, so if this is not this dot, that means it is this. If it is not referred with this, that is, you are trying to access a variable from the same method. So don't do this. Always, if you're trying to access a public variable of the component, always access by this dot. It's a thumb rule. You need to follow this structure. Angular is a opinionated framework, so you need to follow its rules to, just get the desired output. Now, I don't need to express this because I know I can see it from save. So if I save this button, I'm getting console log. See? So sample. So I'm getting that data. So I'm able to. So handle save is picking up the value, and this form is actually directly changing the values of this form. Now, how do I send this variable value to this component so that it can append in this library data? Actually, we need to append in library data. Then only this ng for updates and new book adds, right? So I should take the data from this component. The new data is here. The read data is here. I have to pick it from here and append it here in this variable. So there is another way called output. Okay. So, okay. How can I send data out from this component? So you know, how can you send the data inside to component? You just property bind and take the property name, go inside book, and you say at input book name, and you will be accessible that in the component. But sending is also, there is one another declarative called output. So as soon as I selected output, you see here, you observe here, output is being imported from Angular core. So this is output. Output is an Angular feature. So now output declarative, I will say save book is equals to, this is now not as usual value. This is a event emitter. So I'm trying to send the event to outside. So you should say this is a event emitter. So what it will emit? It will emit a object, but I will say any. So for now, it is not, you need to send what is the format of the data that you want to send. You need to say book name, author name, pages, status, and everything that I wanted to send data in this format. But for our training, we are not changing the structure. We are just saying any. Just a second. Okay, now I have this save book method. It's time I send it back. So now you decided it. You should say this dot. Remember, anything that is defined in Angular, it is this dot is the only way that you need to. So dot emit. So remember this as a source point, and from source point you need to emit, and while emitting you need to send the data to this. Okay, so new book is not the one. You should always remember to call it by this dot new book, this dot. Now whenever I click on this button, handle save is being called. Handle save is now emitting this output, and now I have to subscribe on this emitter now. Okay, where? Here. Now this is a custom event for it will, what it should do is the data will come, this will need to accept the data, and then this dot library data dot push data, sorry. So let's say if you are receiving some data, there should be a mechanism to take the data and put it in the library data, right? Because this is the source data is. Now handle save, this is might be bit confusing for you. Okay, now the cycle is complete. So let me give you a tour. Save book emit. So whenever I created output, and I in the handle save of the add book, I emitted the save book, and when I come to Angular component and I say I subscribe on that handle book emitter. So whenever the handle book is emitted from child component, I'm capturing that data in here, this function on the parent. So on the parent also there should be a function to just handle the data, and finally adding it to the library data. So let me go back and review that. Dummy book, author dummy, pages 40. And if I save it, Okay, it is only logging. Why is that? It is because I haven't saved this file. Now I saved this dummy the file in and save book. So new book has come. So I can keep on adding that books from here. So this is the other component which takes care about just capturing the data, from user and sending that book. So sending that information, newly captured information to outside with this output hook. In the app component, I'm listening on that event and giving it to another function to handle that data. So dollar event is whatever is coming out of this event. That means whatever I'm actually keeping in here before emitting it is accessible here. So what am I sending here? So in the place of dollar event, what will come? This dot book will come. So whatever is the data of the particular state of the data, that will be passed on to here. Now in this handle save of app component, I'll just take the data and push it into library. So that is when the whole cycle is complete. Now you know how to create a component, you know how to send the data to component, you know how to get the data from the component. You can have as many inputs as you want. You can have 100 inputs. Okay, you can have 100 other inputs like this. You can have 100 other components like this. You can have another event emitters like this in a single component. Okay, so this session, so I haven't covered everything that I wanted to cover because this is already too much and I just want to stop there. Okay, we have few more directives, structural directives like ng4, ngf, then we have ng class and other things. So that's the next session. And we have some more tricks and techniques around these event emitters with structure, interfaces and everything. So I just wanted to stop here for this session.